Well, hey everybody, this is Dr. Austin Perlmutter. In today's video, I wanted to talk about change, and I want to talk about growth, and I also want to talk about conscious and unconscious ways of getting there. So let's start with the basics. If you've been listening to my content, you've probably heard me say this before, but it bears repeating. In the modern world, if you accept the status quo, you're most likely going to do poorly. And why do I say this? It's because if you look at the statistics, most people develop chronic and largely preventable diseases. These are things like metabolic disease, and they're also things like anxiety and depression. So if we want to have a chance at a life that is happy, at a life that is healthy, we need to be willing to break with the status quo. Easier said than done though, right? Because the status quo is the status quo because it's so easy and so straightforward to continue on doing things the way that everybody else are doing things. And there are actually a lot of systems in place to keep us making decisions and to keep us kind of within the confines of what everybody else is doing. So then we have to think about how can we escape the status quo? How can we start living lives that are more meaningful, that are healthier, and that are more balanced as it relates to our mental health? So as it pertains to this topic, I've really been thinking through what is the model that could be helpful in enabling people to both understand where they're at in growth and change, and if they're not where they want to be, to enable them to, get back in that system of change. And so there are a lot of great models out there for change. One that I think in particular is helpful is the trans-theoretical model. But I wanted to see if there was something a little bit more practical for the average person, really for me, in enabling me to say, here's where I'm at and here's what needs to happen next. So as it relates to this, I've come up with 4 principal steps. And when I say come up with, I mean everything is a synthesis of what already exists. But 4 steps in enabling me to see where I'm at and then what maybe I need to do to get back on track. So the first one is exploration. In order to be exposed to new ideas, to have any insight into what maybe could be done differently, there has to be this exposure, this exploration. And so this can be something that is intentional, as in watching this content, or it can be something that just happens as a result of your day-to-day. This brings us to step number 2, and that is awareness. So once you're exposed to something that's different from what you perhaps thought was the way of doing things, you may have then an awareness that there's more to this overall picture than meets the eye, that there are maybe different ways that you could be doing things. And then that brings us to step number 3, which is conflict. It's asking then, once you've seen there's something else out there, should I continue to do what I'm doing? Should I abandon or replace these prior ways of looking at the world? And then finally, that's number 4, is the potential for change. So once you are aware, once you have this internal conflict or cognitive dissonance, you can choose kind of 2 options. One is to grow, to incorporate that new data and perhaps change your behavior, change your perspective. And the other is to retreat. It's to go back on the way that things were before. So I think what is really important about this is that if you say, I feel stuck, I feel like I'm not making progress, then you can ask, where might I be in these 4 steps? And if you don't have any new ideas, maybe that's the time to explore, to listen to or learn from new content. If you're feeling conflicted, then you say, hey, this is the natural step before I get to the possibility for growth. So this is actually where I want to be. Okay, so I wanted to mention too, how does this tie into conscious and unconscious processing? Well, to be sure, this is something that can happen below the surface. We might feel conflicted but never call it out for what it is. But if we're conscious of these steps, then we can look and see where might we be, and then how can I modulate this based on where I want to get to. The unconscious piece, though, I think is really even more interesting to me right now, because what I'm understanding through looking into early life influences on brain function is that several unconscious processes actually continue to dictate the way that we consciously see the world even into adulthood. And one of the biggest ways that this is influenced is actually through the gut and through the microbiome. So that seemed like a tangent, it's not, bear with me. What we've learned is that the composition of the gut microbiome and the structural integrity of the gut lining actually change the way that we perceive the world. And why is that? It's because factors that are related to our gut health go to our brains and influence the actual structure and wiring of our neurons. So you can see this most significantly in young ages, where they've shown that through animal studies, mice that don't have a gut microbiome actually show different patterns of myelination in their neurons. They also show different patterns of microglia populations, and those are actually cells involved in the brain's immune system. So that's obviously animal research. How does this pertain to humans? Well, what I think about is every day we are being exposed to trillions of data points, and those data points we usually think about through our senses, right? Through things like our eyes, through things like our ears coming in and influencing our brain. But if you think about the gut, where you have trillions upon trillions of bacteria, where you have all of these data points as represented by the diet, the food that we eat that come into our gut, those signals are translated through the gut and reach the brain, influencing the way that we perceive the world. So let's put this into a format that can make it more readily accessible to anybody listening. What I'm saying is, if our gut health is good, then we're actually promoting the ability to grow and to change, because we're promoting the even chance to have conscious understanding of what we're trying to do. On the other hand, if our gut health is poor, we are actually negatively influencing our conscious decision making and our mood. And so we know that inflammation is linked to depression. We know that inflammation is linked to worse decision making. And if we think about the fact that one of the principal areas in our body that dictates our level of inflammation is actually the gut, then we know that by modulating, by improving the health of our gut, we might be lowering levels of inflammation and supporting healthy decision making, supporting the ability to grow and change. So I guess long story short on this one, this is why it's so important to use interventions like fiber, so soluble fiber, which supports the health of both the gut microbiome as well as the gut integrity, as well as avoiding things like non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs unless necessary. Same thing with PPIs and antibiotics, because these are things that might disrupt the health of our gut. So kind of covered a variety of topics today, but I hope this was interesting for you. I'd love to hear your thoughts, and I hope you're having a phenomenal day. Thanks for watching.